I've always had this but wanted you to have it, Kaz. It's your mother's treasure." Saying this, my mother handed me a small package. I'm about to leave this house soon for university. Puzzled but accepting the package from my mother, I opened it and immediately, tears overflowed from my eyes. No way. I couldn't even understand my own feelings as tears streamed down uncontrollably, like a dam had burst. My name is Kaz Smith, 18 years old. A common name, but my life has been anything but common. About 12 years ago, I was taken from an orphanage, adopted by the Smith couple, Alexander and Charlotte. From that day, I became their child. I don't remember much from my time at the orphanage. I realized I was different soon after starting elementary school. I didn't notice it while playing with peers my age in the orphanage, but upon entering school, I felt out of place. I had no father or mother. Yet, all my classmates had parents and families waiting for them at home. This stark difference deeply shocked and hurt 6-year-old me. Furthermore, there were no foster parents willing to take me in. I often mistook visiting adults as someone coming to take me home. Then, at 7, a turning point came. From now on, you'll live with the Smiths, Kaz. Ms. June, the one at the orphanage who doted on me the most, introduced me to my current parents. By then, they were probably already around their 50s. Adopted children are usually younger, and foster parents are typically in their 30s. I was 7, and my parents were in their 50s. Rather than parents and child, it felt more like grandparents and grandchild. However, I was thrilled to finally meet someone willing to take me in as family. After finalizing the adoption, we moved to a town next to the one the orphanage was in. Finally, I could lead a normal life. But that was an illusion. Children, in their innocent cruelty, can tear into one's heart. My classmates at the new school, upon learning I was adopted, bombarded me with questions. Being from an orphanage, some even said their parents warned them not to associate with me. My existence was that rare, it seemed. In the end, unable to fit in at the new elementary school, I decided to take entrance exams for middle school. When I discussed it with my mother, she asked if something unpleasant happened at school. "Kaz, you've been sulking lately, hadn't you? If there's something troubling you, you can tell me anything." To her kind inquiry, I responded harshly, "None of your business. After all, I never asked to be taken in. If being talked about so much is the price, I was better off at the orphanage." Realizing what I had said, I turned to see my mother's face, smiling, yet her eyebrows were furrowed in concern. I hadn't intended to say such things to her. Feeling a pain in my chest, I could no longer look her in the eye and retreated to my room. My parents, who had fulfilled every wish of mine, yet I acted capriciously, starting to despise my own existence. From around this time, I think I began distancing myself from those around me. With classmates, aside from discussing studies or group work related to class, I didn't interact much. Even though my friends would gather to play video games after school, I wouldn't join them, choosing instead to study in silence. It wasn't out of obligation. It was a choice I made willingly. I thought it might be easier to just retreat into my own shell rather than get hurt. That's what I believed. I ended up hardly talking to my classmates and even less so with my parents. But they didn't get angry or scold me. They simply watched over me in silence. Thus, I passed the middle school entrance exams without saying anything to my elementary school classmates. My father runs his own company, making him what you'd call a CEO. My mother is a handmade artist, selling her creations online and also thriving as an instructor. Therefore, our family was quite well off. The middle school I went to seemed to have a social hierarchy based on family wealth, with the so-called preppy students always at the top. Being from a moderately well-off family, I guess I was somewhere in the middle. I spent my time wanting as little to do with others as possible, but here too, I found myself suffering because of my status as an adopted child. In today's era, whether someone is adopted or a biological child might matter less to most people. But back then, especially in our area, family lineage mattered a lot, and rumors that I wasn't the biological child of the Smiths led to harassment. For me, who had somewhat resigned myself to various fates, it didn't cause much damage, but my parents were furious. They had protested to the school several times, but I, who had been avoiding them at the time, Wouldn't have known. I chose to stay on for high school through internal advancement. There too, I was an outsider, not joining any clubs or participating in cultural festivals or sports days. I thought that if I could graduate from a good university and enter a good company, then no one could look down on me anymore. So, I dedicated myself to my studies. Or perhaps, I had become unable to trust anyone anymore. Having spent 7 years in a unique situation as an individual from a young age and then being adopted, I faced considerable hardships. Unable to fit in well with my parents, the community, or school friends, I isolated myself and stopped talking, withdrawing into my shell. Before I knew it, it was time for my high school graduation. I had been accepted into the pharmaceutical department of a university located somewhere in New York. My birthday is in April, so I was about to turn 19. Yes, about 12 years had passed since I was taken in by my parents. I just wanted to get out of this area. Now that I was 18, considered an adult, I was still immature in many ways, but I was old enough to handle most things on my own. Because the university was located in New York, commuting from home was practically impossible. Thus, I decided to rent a small apartment and live alone. Today, as moving day approached, I was packing my things. Most of my belongings were textbooks and books for reading since I had spent most of my school years studying. I had turned down a game console even when my parents offered to buy one for me. From now on, I wanted to live life in my own way, and to lead a perfect life, undisturbed by anyone else. With that resolution, I faced moving day. I had planned to kill time lounging around in my room until the moving company arrived, but then I heard my mother calling from downstairs. My mother, she adopted me at 47, had just turned 59 recently, and was soon reaching her 60th birthday. As I slowly made my way down the stairs to the living room, my mother beckoned me over with a gentle look. I sat down in a dining chair opposite her. My silent father was beside her. Then, my mother handed me a small package. "I've been keeping this for a while. I want you to have it, Kaz. It's your mom's treasure," she said. Told to open it, I slowly unwrapped the package. What I saw inside took me by surprise. "Mom, is this?" What I found was a small album. As I slowly opened it and looked inside, it was filled with photos of me. From the day I was taken in, 12 years ago, to the recent graduation ceremony, all the memories were beautifully compiled. This album must have been handmade by my mother. I wondered why she chose this moment to give me such a thing. Lost for words, I just stared at the album, puzzled. Then, my mother began to speak slowly. "Even if you hated us, resented us, or despised us, that's okay. But remember this, to us, you are irreplaceable. No matter where you are or what you're doing, you are our family. No matter what happens or where you go, you are our precious child, our treasure. I might not have always understood your feelings, but please, take this as a memory of home. Can you indulge your mother's selfish wish?" Hearing this, I abruptly stood up from the chair. No way. I've always retreated into my shell, being terrible to both of you. And yet, did you really make this for me? I couldn't quite grasp my emotions, but tears started flowing uncontrollably. It felt like a dam had burst. I never once hated my parents. The kind parents who took me in when I had nowhere else to go. Reflecting on their constant smiles, even when I was defiant, made me realize how foolish I had been. Seeing me cry, my mother also slowly stood up. And then, with her small body, she gently enveloped me. I also wrapped my arms around her slowly. Perhaps this was something I had always wanted to do. A mix of nostalgia and sadness made me cry even more. As the movers were taking out the boxes, my father, looking into the distance, said, "Kaz, work hard out there. We will always be watching over you. Your happiness is what matters most to us." With those words behind me, I got into the car and headed towards a new beginning. Upon arriving at my new apartment, I immediately began unpacking. It wasn't much, so I figured it would only take a few hours to finish. Opening a cardboard box, I found an envelope that I didn't recall placing there. Opening it curiously, inside was a bank book with my name on it. I had opened an account at the post office once for a short-term job in high school, but this seemed to be something different. Immediately, a wave of regret hit me. Tears fell on the bank book, causing the ink to smear. Why didn't you tell me? The bank book was filled with entries in my father's neat handwriting. It marked milestones like when I scored 100 on a test, passed middle school entrance exams, or celebrated another birthday. Each milestone was accompanied by a deposit, commemorating even the slightest changes in my life. The total amount was quite significant. Had they told me, I could have expressed my gratitude directly. Contemplating whether to contact my parents, I ultimately chose to just go to bed. I was unsure how to interact with the parents I had long avoided. Moreover, I questioned whether I had any right to say anything at all. I took out the bank book again and opened it to the first page. The initial deposit was a peculiar amount of $7.65. Without any comment from my father, I had no clue what this number signified. But one thing was certain. They had silently supported and watched over me all along. Regardless of my actions, they had always remained my parents. This was an undeniable fact. Blurring my vision slightly, I gently closed my eyes. Months flew by, and suddenly, summer vacation ended, and the new semester started. During this period, I was working part-time at a particular shop. Kaz, please take this to the table over there. After that, 2 drinks and mixed nuts for customer at counter number 3. Oh, and I'll shake the drinks, so just check the pizza and serve it if it's ready. Saying this, she was bustling about. Her name is Mina Johnson, 34 years old. She's the master of this shop. During the day, it operates as a cafe, attracting moms and kids. At night, it transforms into a bar, where adults come to soothe their daily fatigue. It's bar time now. Mina handles the cooking and serving of drinks almost single-handedly while skillfully engaging in conversations with the regular customers. She's beautiful, cheerful, and good at conversing, so more than half of her male customers come specifically for her. Yet, a significant number of female customers also frequent the place. Many women come to her seeking advice, appreciating her good listening skills. On my days off from work, I too visit the shop as a customer and enjoy chatting with Mina. But on weekends and holidays, it's almost like being in a battle. It's natural since Mina and I are the only ones running the fully booked shop. Of course, there are other part-time workers, but today, unfortunately, it was just the 2 of us. Having been trained in both drinks and cooking by Mina, I managed to handle the orders following her instructions. Then, around 11 p.m., we finally got a moment to rest. The influx of customers looking for a second round of drinks was intense, but we managed to get a breather. Well, today was crazy. Even if the other part-timers were here, it would have been tough. Having Kaz, who can do both front and back, on shift, really saved us. While saying this, she handed me a beef bowl she had made for the staff. I'll go talk to the customers who had a drink, so take a break, Kaz. With that, Mina disappeared behind the curtain to the front. And somehow, we managed to close at 3 a.m. The customers were gone, and we finished cleaning up by 5 a.m. Since it was Sunday and we had no plans, the shop was closed. I thought I'd sleep well once I got home, rubbing my sleepy eyes. Then, as we were cleaning up, Mina started a conversation. Hey, Kaz, you are going back to your hometown for the New Year's, aren't you? I don't really have plans to go back, but if we're open, I'll work. At that moment, Mina stopped in her tracks. Wondering what was wrong, she approached me with a serious look. Why wouldn't you go back? Well, I've caused enough trouble for my parents, and after leaving things unresolved, I don't feel like I have the face to show them. That was the truth. I thought about calling them directly about the bank book, but ended up sending an email because I lacked the courage. We hadn't really talked since then. My guilt had grown to the point where I felt paralyzed. Then, Mina seemed to ponder for a moment. With the customers gone and the BGM off, the silence felt increasingly awkward. Just as I was about to change the subject, Mina spoke with a solemn expression. You know, I haven't been in contact with my parents for over 10 years. It's like we're estranged. I had an older sister who died at 18. We had a big fallout over that, and since I was attending schools far away, I haven't gone back or contacted them since graduating college. Pausing, Mina's expression was darker than usual. She was always the most cheerful and supportive, but this was the first time she spoke so much about herself. As I stayed silent, Mina continued. Sometimes I get "Are you okay?" emails from my mom, but I can't bring myself to reply now. I've come to regret it, realizing I never told them about getting married or celebrated my dad's 60th birthday. So, take care of your parents, okay? Unlike me, who's let this drag on for over 10 years, you still have a chance to make things right. By the end of her speech, Mina's usual brightness had returned, but her smile seemed tinged with sadness. Was I projecting my situation onto hers? Or was there another reason her words struck a chord? At the moment, I couldn't tell, but Mina's words had given me a bit of courage. I responded with my own conclusion. Yeah, I think I should talk to my parents face to face. I'll go back for the new year. So about the shift. That's fine, that's fine. Here I am preaching to you, and yet I haven't resolved my own issues. I've decided to go back this new year too. With that, our conversation ended, and we quietly went about hanging a closed sign before each heading home. Then, in late December, I had reserved an express train ticket to go home, but surprisingly, I ran into Mina at the platform. It turned out that Mina and I hailed from the same place. She hadn't brought a resume to the interview because she said it wasn't needed, so I hadn't known. So, after arriving at the nearest station to our homes, we walked side by side towards our respective homes. However, no matter how much we walked, I didn't part ways with Mina. It was as if we were headed to the same place. This premonition proved correct when I stopped, and Mina did too. We were looking at the same thing. You don't mean this is your home, Kaz? Yes, this is my home. No way. Does that mean my parents moved here while I was away? Oh, I should have contacted them beforehand. Planning a surprise like this isn't like me. As we were talking, my mother, noticing our voices, came out, and she looked at us in turn, her eyes widening. Kaz, and you are? Mina. Mom, is that you? At that moment, the air became tense. Mina turned to face us sharply. Kaz, your last name is Smith, right? Yes, that's right. I never suspected because Smith is such a common surname. Listen, my maiden name is Smith. My mother's name is Charlotte, and my father's name is Alexander. You don't mean to say they're the same, do you? Not knowing the correct answer, I was silent, looking at her intently. Then, my mother let out a small sigh and said, "Anyway, come inside. It's cold out here, isn't it? We were just making roasted turkey for the end of the year, so can you help us?" With that, Mina and I exchanged glances but decided to enter the house. Though completely puzzled by the situation, my mother seemed to understand what was happening and looked rather serious. Once inside, my father, who was preparing turkey, turned his gaze slowly towards us. The moment he saw Mina, his hands stopped. Again, a profound silence dominated. How long had passed? Mina and I sat next to each other, with my parents sitting across the dining table. In this room, only the ticking of the clock sounded loudly. Breaking the silence first was Mina. "Hey, what's going on? You say this is your home, Kaz, but what does that mean? Did you have a child without me knowing?" Mina seemed to be quite upset, unusually for her calm self. Considering the age, when I was born, my mother was already in her 40s. While it's not impossible to get pregnant at that age. Then, my mother took several deep breaths and slowly started speaking. "Mina, please calm down and listen. Kaz is indeed our son, but not by birth. He's adopted. That makes him your stepbrother, and also your nephew." As soon as my mother said this, Mina stood up from her chair. Her long hair was down today, unlike its usual updo, so I couldn't see her face from the side. However, it was clear she was trying hard not to show her intense emotions. Then, shaking slightly, Mina said, "I need to cool my head," and staggered out of the house. I hurried after Mina, and there she was, sitting on a bench in a park near our house. "May I sit next to you?" As I sat down, Mina looked at me with an indescribable smile. Considering it's the end of the year, all the students were on winter break. In the park, children from toddlers to upper elementary schoolers were all gathered, playing and laughing together. At least it wasn't an uncomfortable silence, I thought. I told you before that my sister died when she was 18, didn't I? In truth, she died from an illness soon after giving birth. She had to make the ultimate choice between her child and her own life. That's when I discovered the secret of my origin. I was born to Mina's sister, Ellie. My mother became pregnant with me at 18 and apparently chose to have me despite being unmarried. It seems she had a falling out with the father and marrying him. Hearing this, my grandparents were furious and tried to find him, but my real mother stopped them. She had a smooth pregnancy and seemed to have given birth to me without issue. However, she passed away within just half a year after giving birth to me. She had been diagnosed with cancer and needed to start treatment immediately to survive. But starting treatment meant giving up the child, me, which she absolutely did not want to do. So she kept her illness a secret from her sister Mina and her parents and gave birth to me. She began treatment quietly afterwards, but by that point, it was too late. The treatment was in vain, and she passed away, with the family only learning about the cancer shortly before her death. And so, my existence ended up causing even more pain for my grandparents. I looked just like my mother. If only I had resembled the man who abandoned his daughter, the worst man, they might have found some closure. My grandparents apparently said such things back then. But instead, I was born looking just like her, leaving my grandparents at a loss about what to do with me, their reminder of their daughter. Even the thought of raising me brought back the image of their daughter, which they couldn't bear. Gradually, their mental health deteriorated, and they decided they couldn't raise me properly in this state, so they placed me in that orphanage. At that time, I was 15 years old. Of course, I was shocked by my sister's death, but that made me feel all the more that the child she left behind needed to be properly taken care of. It must have been hard for my parents, but I found my nephew, who resembled my sister, utterly adorable. You really do look like her, Kaz. But those two didn't consult me at all before leaving you at the orphanage. Right after you were born. They left you there as soon as they filed the birth registration, so I never knew my nephew's name. Mina said, her fists clenched tightly. At 15, though still a child, I was of an age where I could think for myself to a certain extent. Mina strongly opposed the adult's decision to disrupt a child's life for their convenience, which apparently led to a fallout with her parents. In the end, she chose a university far from home, effectively running away to New York, and had been estranged from them up until now. But becoming an adult, getting married, and reaching the age where I might have children myself, I started to feel like I could understand my parents' feelings. So, when I decided to apologize and start over, this happened, and I was shocked. Her mood seemed to have improved slightly as she smiled. That's when a question occurred to me. Piecing together the story, I realized I was Mina's nephew, and she was my aunt. And my parents were actually my biological grandparents. That meant I wasn't really an orphan. So why had my parents left me in the orphanage? Curiosity getting the better of me, I felt compelled to find out the truth. I'll be going then. All right, take care. I got up from the bench, rented a car nearby, and headed to the orphanage. This was where I had spent my early childhood. Even now, children without families were running around the playground, having a good time. Then, a girl spotted me and ran over to ask if I had come to pick her up. I crouched down to meet her gaze and firmly denied it. I couldn't give her false hope. I remembered how I used to harbor faint hopes only to have them crushed, leaving me hurt. The girl's eyes momentarily filled with sadness, but she quickly returned to her friends in the playground. A woman in her late 30s, who had been watching, approached me. "I'm sorry about that. That's Iris. She always asks everyone like that," she said with a crinkled smile. Something about her face seemed familiar, warming my heart. Then I noticed a small mole under her left eye and remembered. "Could you be Ms. June?" The staff member looked at me in surprise, scrutinizing me closely. It might have felt like a minute. She slowly raised her gaze and said, "Could it be Kaz?" "Kaz, the one Mr. and Mrs. Smith took in. You're Kaz, right?" As I nodded slowly, Ms. June's smile blossomed like a flower. "Oh, little Kaz has grown so much. Please, come in. I'm now in charge here." But I glanced briefly at the playground, contemplating. The children looked at me curiously. "Let me play with them first." "Really? Then, please do. Kids, this big brother is going to play with all of you now." At Ms. June's call, the children gathered around me, eager for games. The boys wanted to play tag or hide and seek, while the girls asked to be pushed on the swing or to play house. As I fulfilled each request, Before I knew it, more than 2 hours had passed. Despite it being winter, I was drenched in sweat. When was the last time I moved my body this much? Sitting on a couch in the lounge, Ms. June brought over coffee and sweets. Being sensitive to hot drinks, I asked before sipping. I wasn't an orphan, right? Ms. June then looked straight at me and began to speak softly. So, you've come after learning everything, seeking the truth. Yes, exactly as you said, Kaz, you were not an orphan. You had a loving family. Actually, your birth mother, Ellie, was a close friend of mine. Ms. June's face wore a nostalgic expression, and she fetched a photo to show me. The photo featured 2 young girls, one unmistakably Ms. June, and the other remarkably resembling me, my mother Ellie. Your acceptance here was both my wish and Ellie's desire. Ellie always seemed a bit out of place, perhaps a bit absent-minded, and I think I was her only friend. Near the end of high school, she suddenly revealed her pregnancy. She hadn't told her family or sister, only confiding in me about her pregnancy, her illness, and her terminal diagnosis. Our parents ran this orphanage, so she asked if anything happened to her, I should look after her child here. Initially, I thought it was a joke. However, Ellie provided detailed explanations about her condition and even had a will prepared, which puzzled me. To me, Ellie was a dear friend, so I chose to believe her. But I could never have imagined that she would pass away so soon. When you were in the orphanage, Ellie was still alive, struggling with her illness. She managed to visit once, bringing this in case you ever wanted to know the truth. She handed me a maternity book. It contained a close-up black and white photo of a newborn me. After being discharged from the hospital post-birth, it seems my mother moved to another ward without ever going home or seeing my face. This was why I was placed in the orphanage as soon as a birth registration was filed. Mr. Smith said this when entrusting you to us. Once we've sorted our feelings, we will surely come to pick him up, so please wait for us. Our parents loved Ellie as their own daughter, so they wanted to help. Mr. Smith made regular deposits, and with that, we were able to take care of you. This explained why no adoption process ever came through for me. And at the same time, it became clear that my parents had always intended to come for me someday. The day they came to take me was when they were ready, having sorted out their feelings, to raise me as their son. Do you hate your parents, Kaz? No. That's good to hear. I stood up, thanked her for the coffee, and left. When I returned the rental car and got back home, Mina had already returned, and a heavy atmosphere filled the living room again. But undeterred by the atmosphere, I looked straight at my parents and said, Dad, Mom, thank you for raising me to this point. Technically, I might be your grandson, but didn't you say, no matter what, wherever I go, I'm still your precious child, your treasure. To me, you both are irreplaceable. As I said this, my mother's eyes welled up with tears, and my father, silent, looked at me with a warm gaze. Then, slowly turning towards Mina, she straightened up as she noticed my gaze. Mina, thank you for genuinely worrying about me and for confronting my parents on my behalf. But there's no need for you to sacrifice your peace of mind anymore. To me, you're an aunt by blood, a sister by bond, and a kind, dependable master of our workplace. Hearing this, Mina burst into tears. Our parents watched over us from above, enveloping us in kindness, and the heavy air that had been there dissipated. Subsequently, Mina and I returned to New York. Back in New York, I resumed my life as a university student and part-time worker, and Mina as a shop manager. One day, as we went about our usual routine, a regular customer commented, "You two are just like siblings, always together like 2 peas in a pod." It was a comment we often received, but that day, Mina, pulling me by the shoulder towards her, said with a bright smile, "He's genuinely my prideful little brother." The customer, slightly tipsy, looked at me and declared, "Then let's toast to Kaz becoming a brother." But then, unexpectedly, Mina suddenly mentioned she couldn't drink alcohol. Mina announced she was expecting a baby. Everyone present, customers and staff alike, celebrated joyously. The cafe was enveloped in an even warmer atmosphere than usual. As the year-end approached, we decided to return home together. Upon hearing Mina's pregnancy news, my parents, despite being around their 60s, jumped around joyously like children. A new grandchild will make things even livelier. Yes, Kaz is both a grandson and a cherished son to us," they said, smiling kindly at me. While the three of them were caught up in excitement, my eyes were drawn to a pink booklet on the table. Opening it out of curiosity, I found it filled with photos of Mina, a woman I presumed to be my mother, and many others. My mother must have enjoyed making albums, as it was meticulously well kept despite its age. As I flipped through the pages, the photos transitioned to those of a baby boy. It was likely me. Despite losing a daughter, my parents treasured these photos of me which Ms. June had sent. The $7.65 at the beginning of the bank book was my birth weight. But of course, they knew they are my grandparents as well as my parents. We've been apart for 7 years and barely spoke for 12, but from the moment I was born, I've always been loved by someone. Looking at the last photo in the album, of my mother holding me just after birth, tears streaming down her face, I gently closed the album.